Hey everyone, welcome back to This is a Woman podcast. I'm so excited for this episode today. The guest on today is Norma Padilla Murakami, and we're going to talk all about her book, Abortion Changes You, a 21-day devotional to bring hope, healing, and grace and forgiveness to women wounded by abortion. And Norma, I have known since I was a young child, and she's just been an absolute pleasure to be in my life and to grow up going to church with her and to be involved in this movement with her. And so you guys are going to hear all from Norma. So a little bit about her before we get to the little interview is Norma Padilla Murakami has been a pro-life advocate, leader, and speaker in the pro-life arena for 20 years. Norma's entry into the pro-life arena began with her own personal journey in finding help and healing from her own past abortions. Her pro-life ministry began at Calvary Chapel Chino Hills. In 2007, Norma founded Options, a women's care center in Chino, California, and then opened a second location, which was a former abortion clinic in Los Angeles County. She has assisted in educating churches around the nation in the startup of pro-life programs, along with abortion healing ministries in their churches, and initiated the first ever abortion recovery assistance national training on the West Coast. In 2010, Norma was invited to Heartbeat International's Babies Go to Congress to lobby on behalf of pregnancy centers, where she had the honor of meeting with Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Norma has given numerous interviews on Christian radio and in churches. She also initiated a Southern California coalition for pregnancy care directors in order to have a stronger presence in Southern California. In 2013, Norma transitioned from pregnancy care work to focus on writing, speaking, and helping men and women who have suffered after abortion. Norma has been married for 37 years to Tim Murakami, a retired executive at the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. They have 4 adult children and 15 grandchildren. Norma and her husband reside in Southern California. And a little ending like Norma has here on the back of her book is she says, many women suffer a spiritual crisis following an abortion. I recall calling out to God for many years to help me out of my despair. I'm so grateful he heard me and lovingly pulled me out of that dark place. He poured his healing oil over my wounds and turned my wailing into dancing. My prayer is that God will use this devotional as a tool to help you bring into the arms of the only one who can truly mend your heart, Jesus Christ, who is also the only one who can set captives free. Women are currently being erased in culture, and I want to amplify their voices and share their stories. Well, hello, Norma, and welcome to This is a Woman podcast. We are so excited to have you on today.
Thank you for having me, Sophia.
Yes. And so the guests have heard a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today and the issue of abortion and life. And you just, first of all, the Abortion Changes You, your new little book that is out. It's just amazing. I've been able to go through it. And even though I haven't gone through an abortion myself, I've just been able to learn so much about women that have and how the things they struggle with and the things they face. But Norma, I would love just to dive into your testimony because you didn't just wake up one day and decide to randomly write this book. There was a lot that got you there before that. And so would you mind sharing your testimony with the listeners?
Yeah, so it was like maybe 25 years ago when I started to experience some depression, anxiety. Well, first of all, let me back up. I am a Christian. I've been a Christian for nearly 40 years. One of the things that I remember so vividly was that I asked, once you accept the Lord and you walk up to have your counselor pray for you, one of the questions, the number one question I asked them was, does God forgive for abortion? And they said, of course, yes. And so I thought, okay, great, I'm good, and it's just like, whew. And then that was it, just went on, my husband and I have been married 38 years. And we started to have our family. We were growing and kids were getting bigger. We went to a small church called Calvary Chapel Chino Hills. And they were in need of a lot of ministry because it was so new. I mean, really, there was like 80 people there at the time. And so my husband and I I'm going to spare all the details, but we were leaders of the post-abort. No, sorry, that was later. A security and law enforcement ministry, which was a ministry to the husbands and their wives. And so it was a much needed ministry. And then my husband went on to develop the security ministry. So always ministering that way. And also my husband is in law enforcement. That's why. And then we started a parenting class as well. So none of these things we set out to do. It was a need. And Pastor Jack and Lisa from Calvary Chino Hills would ask us, okay, we have this need. And we happen to be already going through those classes or already doing those things. And so they said, well, would you guys want to head these things up? And it's like, not really, because we don't know what we're doing. There was a need, so we stepped in. God was so good. Our family was growing. We were in ministry. Our kids would come along with us. We were there, Sundays, Wednesdays, for all sorts of events and everything. We practically lived at the church. So things were going good. I mean, we were very blessed. But after, I'll fast forward that, like maybe 10 years, being at church and serving and doing all the right things that I thought, this is what Christians do. And so I started to struggle with some depression and anxiety just kind of out of nowhere. And I just thought, okay, this is just a phase. I'll get over it. It's postpartum. It's this, it's that. I didn't know what to think. I just thought, I'll be fine. I just have to pray, read my Bible a lot more. And, but I didn't want to tell anybody that I was struggling with these things because I was in a place of leadership. You just don't, people like that just don't suffer, misconception, right? So it's funny because what I'm sharing with you is sometimes that I share this in training with churches and pastors and the leadership and pastors' wives. Because they do have people serving in ministry at their church who are suffering and are not talking about it because you're already in this place of leadership. And so you want to just you're not supposed to be a failure. You're not supposed to be vulnerable. I mean, that was my understanding of, ministry and God and all of that, which was a misunderstanding, which I came to learn later. Anyway, I began to struggle with some things and just didn't know where it was coming from, and I thought, I know, maybe I need to go volunteer at a pregnancy center because that's I'll just fold baby clothes. I won't be in leadership. I won't do anything. I'll just be folding baby clothes. And so one thing I didn't know is you had to go through training for that. And I was like, training for this just to fold baby clothes? And so later on, when I opened up pregnancy centers, I realized, yes, people went through training to become a volunteer. And so while I was sitting in that training, I started to get really super uncomfortable. And I had suffered with backaches and migraines for many, many years. And I started to get in that training. It was like it got really intense. And then I couldn't stop weeping. So the nurse manager who was leading the training on our break pulled me aside and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm here I want to volunteer here, but I don't know why I'm crying so much. And I don't know why my body is in so much pain right now." But I had been suffering like that for quite a few years. And so she said, "Let me ask you, have you had an abortion?" And I said, "Yeah, but what does that have to do with anything?" And she says, "Well, sometimes if you've had an abortion and you're in this training, there are things that can trigger that pain if you have not gone through healing." And I was like, healing? But I'm forgiven for the abortions. I'm forgiven. I don't understand what you're saying. She says, "Well, here's a brochure for the group that we have at their pregnancy center. It's a post-abortion Bible study called Forgiven and Set Free." And I said, "Oh, I'm not going to need that. I'm forgiven. I mean, I'm fine. I'm not having a good day today." So I left early. And after that, we went to the banquet where this pregnancy center had a fundraising banquet, which many of us have been to. And I heard a lady's testimony. The guest speaker was a post-abortive woman. She began to share her testimony about how abortion, you know, she had suicidal thoughts, she's depressed, had anxiety, hers was drug use and so forth. And I thought, my gosh, it sounds like me. But dare I tell anybody who was sitting around me that I was relating to this lady's story as much as I hated it. And so I bought her book, took the brochure. After hearing her story, my symptoms started to get worse, like backaches, migraine headaches. I was running out of medication at home, so I'd have to go to the emergency and they'd give me an IV pain medicine, really strong pain medicine, and my relief would be gone. So maybe 2 weeks out of the month, I was having a pain-free month. But for the most part, I was in a lot of pain. And so that would lead to depression and hopelessness, because it's like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get it together? You kind of put those expectations and you're kind of hard on yourself over it. And I know that many women struggle with that too. So anyway, I went through this Bible study and I met with my pastor and his wife. And I said, we need to take a break from ministries right now. I'm going to go through this Bible study because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I've had abortions, or I said abortion and abortions because I didn't even know how many I had had at the time. And so he said, I've never heard of that. But Lisa, his wife, had heard of it. And she says, I've heard of that. Like, it affects women that way. He's like, oh, okay, well, we'll pray for you. And, we're here for you and so on. So I went through the Bible study and I was terrified to go through it because I didn't know what to expect. Like, am I going to have to revisit all this, and how painful is it going to be? And I'm going to get another migraine. I'm going to get another backache. This is going to be destructive for me, I thought. So I went to the Bible study the first night, and the Lord healed me that night instantaneously, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in one night. I never did get a headache or a backache after that. I mean, I might get a headache or a migraine because I'm eating too much sugar or something now, which is but not like I used to, where I was out of commission for half the month. I no longer had insomnia. I no longer had depression. I no longer saw the world in a gray, dark form. I didn't realize I really saw the world that way. I thought that was normal. I thought thinking of suicide was normal. I thought, oh, everybody must struggle with this. It must be normal. Like, I'm a Christian. I mean, I guess people just think about death a lot. And that was me. And so, but that after that night at that Bible study, I never had one thought of suicide after that, because I was kind of plagued with it for about 5 years. Just thinking, how, Lord, please take my life. So going through that Bible study, and it's like a 10-week study, and they have you, which I talk about in my book, they have you name your children and figure out, or have God help you figure out their identities, whether they were boys or girls, which was a little scary. But I saw afterwards, after going through it, I thought, oh, this is so needed. And so many women aren't getting this. And that's why there's so much self-hatred and lack of care, and maybe alcoholism, drug use, self-abuse, basically, is what women end up doing to themselves. So you're kind of making yourself pay for something you did, for sin. But, we can't do that. We don't have that control. Only Jesus can forgive. And it's not ours to bear. And so, but you kind of, I meet so many women and they tell me that they're like, I've never shared this. I just carry it. I keep it to myself because it's my secret. And so there's a lot of secrecy revolved around the, choosing abortion. And it's a heavy burden to carry. And that is what causes the illnesses and the sickness and all of that. it just brings your health down. Because God did such an amazing work and healed me like that, I thought, oh my gosh, who else needs this? So if I feel this way, then others must need the same kind of help. And I didn't set out to do it, but at church, people would ask me, like, oh, so what have you been doing? I haven't seen you around or whatever. Because I did really take a break. Like, I would just go to church on Sundays. I really sat under the Lord's wing to heal me. It was a very hard time to walk through that healing process. It was just so hard. And so I'd say I'm working on I'm going through a Bible study that what Bible study are you going through? It has to do with some things I did in my past, and the Lord would tell me, tell them. So I was like, I have these abortions, and there's a Bible study out there for it, and I really needed help. I wanted to work through it, and I wanted to learn how to. I said so. And then, I'm not kidding you, people would tell me right then and there, well, I've never told anybody, but I've had an abortion myself. So had I not ever said anything, people would not be talking about it to me. So that's the way this ministry started. And so, fast forward, I thought, I just want to help women not make this mistake that I'm making. At Calvary Chino Hills, Pastor Jack's wife asked me to start the post-abortion study there. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I can't do that. No. And she said, well, who else would do it here? Because you've already gone through it. I had already gone through it a few times because I would always take a friend and they go, can you take it with me? And I take another friend, can you take it with me? And of course, I'm going to support them, right? So I told her, okay, we'll do it. And I took about 200 women through it during that time. And it was a very secret group. And after that, I went to pastors' wives retreats and got invited to them and talked to them about this ministry and having it at your church, because they might have women and men who are in leadership like we were that are suffering in silence. And so from that point, I helped train a bunch of Calvary chapels on how to get this Bible study going. And so I started my own training after that. And so one thing just led to another. It's just like there was such a need that I thought, I'll just do it and train other people, just duplicate what I'm doing, and we'll get a lot of women healed. And that was a blessing. That really was a blessing to see churches very open to it. But it's because they heard my story, and because I was in leadership and I kept it secret. Because God forbid, the leader of this ministry has had abortions. But that's a lie from the enemy. So what? But you are so, entrapped in this bondage of secrecy that you just don't want to share anything. And so you never get to really fully operate in the fullness of Christ because you're busy covering. Bandage here, bandage there.
Absolutely. And when I started getting involved in the life movement and learning about abortion and all those things, I really got into it because I recognized what was happening to the innocent children in the womb. But the more I learned about abortion, yes, I stand against it because of that. But abortion is so anti-women. And I think we're painted this lie by society, whether it's in politics, whether it's just in culture, whether you're on social media and you're a high school girl scrolling and you keep seeing abortion is a woman's right. Abortion is we deserve it. We deserve this right and stuff. And it just breaks my heart because the more I've learned about it, the more I've heard about your story and about other stories, it is abortion hurts women, and it leaves, as you said, you spent years trying to pretend to everyone else that nothing was wrong, trying to figure out with yourself, you for years didn't even know why you were facing what you were facing. And so it's so heartbreaking. I mean, the stats we know, 1 out of every 4 women have had an abortion. So many women are walking around every day struggling with this, with a secret. And there are some that shout their abortion and proclaim it was the best thing they've ever done. And I think the only reason they do that is because they don't want to come to terms with reality because of what comes with that, because of the depression, because of the suicide ideation, because of the alcoholism, the drugs, all the things. I mean, you, in your book, you perfectly list out the different effects of abortion. So you see the eating disorders, the relationship problems, the isolation, controlling, lack of self-care, so many different things you listed. And so I truly believe the women that are shouting their abortion and proudly chanting that abortion is a woman's right, if they've had an abortion, it's because they don't want to come to terms with what happened. But I think this is so necessary, and you sharing with other churches and starting that ministry up of how to help women find that healing. Because like you said, you originally thought, you just said, hey, like, does God forgive me for my abortion? And the lady was like, yeah. And you're like, good, I should be good to go then, not realizing it's not just that there are steps you have to go through to get to that. And I kind of want to dive into some more of those steps and what you've talked about in your book, Abortion Changes You. But before we get into that, I do want to touch on, shared earlier when you were first sharing your story, that you said when you were saying, oh, I've had an abortion before, you said, well, I've had abortions and I don't even know. I didn't know at the time how many I've had. I think a lot of people think the only people that have abortions it's because it was to save the mother's life, or because it was sexual assault, or it was just a one-off because they weren't ready. But no one ever has more than one abortion. I think that lie is fed to us to just make it seem like it's not this thing that's constantly happening. But here you can sit here and say, no, I firsthand can share that, yes, I've done it more than once. And can you explain, maybe for the girls that are sitting there now, finding themselves in the same position you found yourself in that time, can you explain maybe the mindset you had about it then when you were going through that versus how you now understand it to help those girls that found themselves in that moment currently?
Yes, it was legal. I used it as a means of birth control. So if I thought I was pregnant and I go into I don't think they were OBGYNs. They were like women's clinics. Now that I learned what I've learned and now that I know what I know, there's a chart on the wall, and I don't know if they still do this, but it says birth control, the pill, IUD, abortion, condoms, and then I'm not sure what else. I think there's one more. So, the gels or whatever. So, or the diaphragm. Yeah. So abortion. So they go, oh, well, abortion, you just go in and the next, you're fine. Like you're done with it. So to me, that was a form of birth control because it was listed there and it was legal. So here I am, 17 or 18. And I'm thinking, well, I remember thinking this very clear. Well, it must be okay because it's legal. Why would it be legal then? Just not knowing that it is harmful. And I wasn't able to take the birth control pill. I would get really nauseous. And, you're 17 or 18. I was not that responsible. I was afraid my mom was going to find my pills, So instead I would just use it as birth control. So even if it was just one boyfriend or whatever, that was my birth control, which is it's terrible, but had they told me, which they're not going to, the possible side effects or the effects, no, they didn't. They just said, it's fine. It's a blob of tissue. It's just a clump of cells. It's products of conception. I mean, that is just so impersonal. You just think, well, it's just a clump of cells. And of course, all that starts in the public schools because I remember when we'd have our health and sex class or whatever in junior high, um, or maybe it was elementary school. I don't even know if they do that anymore, but it was always like a pollywog or it looked like a pollywog or a little lizard or something. And it's like, in your mind, that's what you're thinking. Like, well, it's just a little creep, it's just like a little thing. And so you start to, do you see what I'm saying? You just start to convince yourself that it's not bad. It's just, I can't be in that situation. I'm too young. I'm 17. I'm 18. I'm not married. I don't think I really want to stay with this guy, that kind of thing. And so, I know because when we opened our pregnancy center, the clients that would come through there had the same stories. Like, I'm too young, don't like, this guy, I don't think it's going to last, or he's not the right guy, or whatever. It's all kind of the same. It's a need, there's a need to be free from this problem. And so you start with that denial process. So that's why I really did not know how many abortions I had, because I had been denying the fact that so you just put it out of your mind and you just never think about it until some things come up, like you start having suicidal thoughts, you start becoming depressed, you start becoming crying for no reason, or I couldn't go to baby showers for a long time. One period of when I was going through this, when I was kind of going to my bottom, it was very hard to be at a baby shower because it was a big trigger for me. So I'd get a migraine, and it really would happen. It wasn't like so I'd get a migraine. So therefore I could say, well, I can't make your baby shower because I'm not feeling well. And so, that was kind of so I look at it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just so many problems that abortion causes in a life. It's like, like you said, it's to destroy the woman. It's very satanic. It's destructive. Yeah. And they won't recognize it in the mental health department at all. They refuse to. They will not. And I don't care who says what, they'll fire you before you start talking to them. If you're a director of a psychiatric hospital or something, which has happened, you start to discover that abortion's related to all these other issues, mental issues. They'll fire you. They tell you, don't talk about that. You can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I had that happen to a friend. So it's PTSD. When I used to stand out on the sidewalks, I tell the girls, do not do this. You could come out of there and you may not be able to get pregnant again, or you're just going to have mental issues. Don't do it. I'm here to tell you, I had those issues. I had mental problems because of abortion. I said, God has healed me now, but I said, don't do it. Don't do it. I'll plead with them. Like, I'm practically grabbing their arm. I mean, I don't, because you can't do it, but I'll just say it like in a matter. You only have a few seconds, like 30 seconds to catch their attention. And so it's not healthcare. As much as we hear about that, it's healthcare. It's not. Listen to what I'm saying. There's so many women that are suffering tragically. I had a friend who said she could never have kids, and her dad was a doctor. He was a physician, and he performed her abortions on her. She was so messed up mentally, but you would never know it. But when I came out talking about my story, she shared her story. And that was, then I realized, now I know why she struggles so much, with everything. But yet on the outside, it looks perfect. So can you imagine that? Having your own dad abort your own children? So, it's so right now, some of the interviews I'm doing is I'm sharing, what abortion did to me, and that it's not healthcare, because we're seeing it everywhere, and it's so ramped up right now. And it's like, no, it's not. It's hurting women. and the babies' lives too. I mean, don't think for one moment that broke my heart when I realized, as I went step by step, fetal development and abortion procedures. Because don't forget, we're in denial, we're uneducated. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going in there doing that. Otherwise, maybe some people are, I don't know. But it was just heartbreaking to know that I basically took the lives of my own children because I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very heartbreaking. I'm surprised I survived it. I didn't think I was going to survive it. I mean, 6 deaths in my family.
Yeah. But where you're at now, I think is so beautiful for other women to see that are secretly struggling with this, that no one else knows, that they haven't told anyone. And for them to see you can sit here and you're free of those strongholds now because we have a good God who forgives and heals, and that you can make it through something. And I do want to get more to what that has looked like lately and getting through those strongholds and to then helping other women through that. But before we fully get into that, you and your husband have 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of fear for women that have had an abortion to then actually have kids one day and to plan to have kids and to want to have kids. Had you gone through healing and been healed before you had your children, for those listening that don't know your story, or had you not gone through healing, and what was that like when you had kids and you were still struggling with the past?
Oh yeah. Well, I mention it in my book. I don't know if you saw that, but you do kind of have detachment from your own birth children, and you don't know why. You think, I'm looking forward, to being pregnant and having a child, because deep down inside you might not have been able to.
Mm-hmm.
But then that, like, there's just that sadness, which I didn't feel like I needed to be sad, but it's like, because you're thinking of the other children that see, even though you don't acknowledge, even though I hadn't acknowledged when I went in there to get an abortion, oh, this is a child. But I think everybody knows deep down inside, yes, it is. It's our motherly instinct. So that would trigger some sadness. Yeah. And then and I thought, oh, that's just postpartum. But when I started to learn what I learned about abortion, I thought, no, it does affect your relationship with your living children because you feel guilty. So you can overcompensate. Some people overspoil their kids. Some people get controlling. Some people get all kinds of, it's just unhealthy parenting. Yeah. And I had this conversation with a director of a homeschool group that I went through when my kids were little. And now my kids are going through it with their kids. And I shared that story that when I was homeschooling, I really was having a hard time because everything my kids did just was like magnified because I wasn't operating as a healthy mom. I said, so I'm sure you have other women here who are going through the same. It was when I was handing her my book because she wanted a copy. So I was kind of sharing with her. And so I said, but people use homeschooling in my case, and I'm just talking about homeschooling. I don't know if it's always like that, but it's easy to do that to protect your kids and your family so that nothing bad happens to your kids. So there's so much psychological damage that goes along with abortion. And that's why I call the book Abortion Changes You.
Absolutely. So then, like you said, you went through the healing yourself. Then you started helping all these other women go through the healing. Churches learn about it to help their congregants go through it. Because again, we like to pretend that abortion hasn't affected a lot of women, but it has. Like I said, 1 out of every 4 women have had at least one. This is affecting a majority of our society. And so you spent time, you started up the Women's Pregnancy Center Options, and you founded that, got that going. What got you to decide, okay, I'm going to now write a book about this for women to go through? it's the mix of it's your story versus all of the actual. I mean, if you're just listening on like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can't see it, but if you're watching on the screen, you'll see this is actually a devotional you can go through and write out and take thoughts and notes from all. It's a 21-day devotional. So what inspired you? What made you decide that, okay, I'm going to now get this book going, get this devotional going?
Well, every time I'd speak, if I was speaking at a church or a women's group, people would always ask me, do you have a book? Do you have a book? That went on for years. And I kind of felt like, gosh, I'm being a little, just because I in my mind, I'm like, I can't write a book. Like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm not so-and-so, who writes books all the time. And so I have a friend who's an author, and I'm like, I'm definitely not like her. So I just thought it was a hard project. Like, I don't know if I could do this. And so, but the Lord convicted me one day and said, okay, you're saying you can't do this, but trust me, I want you to walk through this, and you need to have a tool. So when you speak, you leave them with a tool, which is a good steward of what I've done in your life. And I was like, okay. So I met a publisher like last November, because I had met with different publishers, but it's really expensive to write a book, and a lot of them don't really want to. You have to pay a lot more for them to help you. And I need a lot of help because I've never done this before. I needed somebody to take my hand and hold my hand and help me get this out. Like somebody I know I can call on, and I'm not going to feel dumb. Like, okay, this is a dumb question, but so yeah. And so I found this publisher, God-fearing couple, and the Lord said, "These are them. These are the people." And so I prayed about the finances, and God provided $10,000 to write this little 21-day devotion. It's so little because if it would have been bigger, it would have been 20,000. I'm like, okay, I can do 10. So, but she said, "Why don't you write a 21-day devotional?" And I thought, you know what? Because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't just want to write my story out. I wanted somebody to have a tool, and they could just say they live in the middle of 100 miles away from a pregnancy center where they can't get to a class. Of course, now there's Zoom classes, but I want them to have this and be able to take it and get a lot of healing just from this book. And then if they finally get a Zoom going or find out about something else, at least this will take them through it and get a lot of healing from it. And even if it's just from my story. So that was one of the things that this lady I've known for a very long time called me, and she said, "Your book inspired me to share with my family. I've never shared with them my abortion story." She said, "Instead, I just dove into politics all these years." She goes, "And I was, city council, and I was this and that from these other city, she goes, I was constantly involved." She goes, and it was my way of hiding. And I was so blessed. And this lady's like in her 70s now. And so I was so blessed that this little tiny book helped her recognize that she needed to share with her family. And now she told me, she goes, "I want to share my story." So I'm probably going to invite her to Washington, D.C. to share on the steps of the Supreme Court with us.
Wow, how amazing. I love that. I love that because it's not everyone that's gone through the healing is going to feel called to share, but this being able to go through this devotional, being able to talk with you, these women that have gone through this, they might realize it's God's calling on their life to also share. And so I just love that you being bold and trusting in God to listen to his calling and saying yes to him is now encouraging other women to do the same thing and say yes to him and say yes to speaking out. I mean, I think when you do speak out, it helps other women recognize they're not in this alone, that they're not the only one, which I think abortion so often does. It makes all these women think they're the only one. You're by yourself. You're the only one that's done this. And so I think this book going through it just opens that up for other women to recognize, hey, it's not just me. I'm not alone. I'm not by myself in this. With that, is there maybe one of the days out of the 21 days you can share a little bit about with the listeners so they kind of get the idea of what they could learn from this, what they could expect from this if they themselves have struggled through an abortion and want to get a copy of the book?
Yes, day 20, and it says, it's Psalms 34, 4 through 5. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. And that's very important because women are walking around with a cloak of shame around them, and especially if you're a Christian. And so the Lord wants to heal us. He wants to deliver us from that. He does not want us to live in bondage or shame. And so, and you look up and your faces are radiant. I mean, think about that. His face is radiant, and we can be just as radiant as he is. And so that, because we're created in his image. And so the smile that you see on my face right now, I really feel like when I was depressed those years, I felt a lot older, and I felt like I looked a lot older than I even look now. So I feel like the Lord has set me free, and I lost so many years that he's given them back to me, but even better, right? Yes. So he wants to set you free, ladies, and he wants to remove those fears, because the fear is like, if I have to revisit that, or if I have to face those abortions. I remember in my book, I did write, like, if I get to heaven, are those babies going to hate me? I'm going to see those babies and they're just going to hate me. No, we are going to be reunited with them. They have a new body. I will have a new body, and I don't know what it's going to be like, but I know that we're going to be reunited with our loved ones, and so there's a freedom in that and an acceptance in that. And it's just a better understanding of who God is. He's all knowing. He loves us. He forgives. Much to me, because I felt ugly for the long time. When I look in the mirror, I just see a woman who's had an abortion, just an ugly person, and I believe that God has given me radiance from the inside out. I really do believe that. So I finally saw myself, after going through the Bible study and everything, like dressed in white clothing, like a bride, instead of the gray cloak of darkness that I would look in the mirror and see. So, yeah.
It's so encouraging, I think, for anyone listening, from moms to girls that have dealt with this, to grandmothers that are, how can I help my granddaughter through this because she's going this, to all the people listening, to see, not just to hear that there's freedom, but you can hear it in your voice. You can see it on your face. I can just feel the freedom that you have through giving this to God and going through the healing, and then that there's just that opportunity to get there, and that there's the hope to get there. So with that, how is the best way for anyone listening to be able to get your book?
Well, you can go on Amazon. It's on Amazon, and I was actually bestseller for, it doesn't matter, but my publisher was excited about that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Bestseller. We've never had that so quickly. So, yeah, it was in 4 categories, but yeah, Abortion Changes You is on Amazon, so you can get it there. And I think it's like $12.95 or something.
Perfect. Amazing. So for everyone listening, if you want to go grab a copy of it, check out the show notes, the caption. I will put the link to it so that way you can find it. But if you don't want to follow the link and you just want to search it up on your phone, like Norma said, Abortion Changes You on Amazon. And Norma, with that, I always like to kind of end with the guests just being able, if there's anything that we haven't talked about that you want to share, or if there's any final words you really want the listeners to take away, I just want to open the floor for that.
Yeah. So one thing that I realized is, once we went through the post-abortion Bible study, the women felt so free that they wanted to volunteer. And they thought, where do we volunteer? What do we do? Do we have a pro-life ministry at this church? So from that was birthed the pro-life ministry. And we would go out and in groups and go help other pregnancy centers or other things. So from that point on, we started pro-life ministry. And then I went on to start the pregnancy care center because I was taking local high school girls into my house, counseling them not to get an abortion. So my living room looked like a looked like a pregnancy center counseling. So pretty soon I just thought, okay, I can't do this because I can't give them pregnancy tests in my own home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we filed our 501c3 with the advice of our pastor, Pastor Jack Hibbs. And he said, file your 501, I was telling him that we were taking all these girls locally to the to the pregnancy center. And he said, you need to file your 501c3 and maybe start a center. And I was like, no, I can't do that. And so I'm just trying to, do what I'm doing now. And so he said, well, we can't do it here at the church. So not that they don't want to, but, so we filed our 501c3 within 6 months of building. We had funds to support the center. And there's some amazing stories that went along with that. So now I'm walking around church or around town and I see 17-year-old kids who their moms came in and were abortion minded, and we counseled them to keep their babies. Yeah. So it's, and they'll remember me and go, like, that's him or that's her. And it's like, God is so good. So,
That's amazing. God is so good. And I think an important takeaway, if you are a mom of daughters listening right now, Norma, you just mentioned that you were helping teach these girls. You weren't waiting for these girls to find themselves pregnant and then trying to say, okay, here's your other options. Here's how we can get you through this. You were talking to the girls before they even got to that stage. And hey, there's ways to prevent this. We know what causes this. This doesn't just randomly happen. This is what abortion is. And so if you are a mom or if you are a grandma listening and you have a daughter or granddaughters in your life, have those conversations with them. Be honest and truthful about what abortion is. I mean, have your high school or college age daughter go through this book, maybe so she can learn a little bit about how she would be affected if she did get an abortion. I mean, I truly don't believe you had to just have an abortion to read through this book. Go through this book so you can learn how to help the women in your lives that have. Get your high school daughter this book and walk through it to 21 days. Take a month, walk through it with her. And so that way she can see how abortion does change women, how it is harmful to women. And just knowing the truth of it. And it's not a fear tactic of like, here's the scary truth, so don't get one. I want you to know the truth. So if you find yourself in a situation like that, you can come to me as your mom. You can come to me as your aunt, your grandmother, whoever it is you're walking through this book with, and know that I'm here to help you through whatever you're going through. But know that you're equipped with the truth. I mean, use this as something to equip your daughters with the truth.
Yes.
But with that, Norma, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for being bold and for listening to God's calling on your life and saying yes. I mean, I think it's really important to note in your story that every time Pastor Jack and Lisa were like, you should do this, or every time you felt God calling you, you need to do this, you're always like, no, God, because sometimes we think we're too small to do that, or we haven't gone through the stuff healing in our own lives to do that. And yet, even though you originally were like, I don't know about that, God, you did it. And he walked you through it. And just look at the amazing results of that, of the women that have had healing because you said yes to God. And so if you're listening right now, be bold like Norma, say yes, listen to God, and follow your calling in your life. And get the book, check the caption, find the link to it there. But Norma, thank you so much for being on and for sharing your story.
Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate it. God bless you. And thank you for everything you're doing too.
Thank you.
You're amazing.